My name is Pat Tully, and I'm director of the Ketchikan Public Library in Ketchikan, Alaska. In June of 2022, our library hosted a Drag Queen Storytime as part of our celebration of Pride Month, which caused quite a lot of controversy in our community. But tensions surrounding the library started long before this and have continued off and on since then. In this talk, I will provide a brief history of Ketchikan's library, then focus in on recent library challenges, starting with the contentious debate over the location of a new library building that took place a dozen years ago. A decade later, the library faced criticism in October of 2021 over library displays of books on gender and LGBTQIA+ issues. Several months later, a much larger controversy blew up over the June 2022 Library Pride Month activities, which directly led to a narrowly defeated October ballot measure to partially defund the library. Shortly before the election, a group proposed that the library be transferred from city to borough control, and in February 2023, the library faced its first book reconsideration request in at least 10 years. I'll conclude with a summary of a few common characteristics of these disparate challenges, the mistakes we made and the lessons we learned in addressing them, and how all of this gave us a renewed understanding and appreciation of the principles and ideals of librarianship. First, some background. Ketchikan's library was founded in 1901, just a year after the city of Ketchikan was incorporated. For a brief time, the library was just a bookcase that was moved from business to business. But the Ketchikan Library Association, established by local women in 1901, held fundraisers and worked with city government to build our first library, a 20-foot by 40-foot building depicted here, which opened in 1903. The library has had several homes from that time to this, and since 2013, the library has been in this beautiful building at the top of a hill above the city. The library is currently a department of the city of Ketchikan. The city is in the Ketchikan Gateway Borough in southern southeast Alaska. Most of the borough is located on Revilla-Gagato Island. The city and the borough have separate governments, although several attempts have been made over the years to consolidate them. So far, these have been unsuccessful. Since 1985, the library has served borough residents within and outside the city limits, and residents of the borough outside the city are represented on the Library Advisory Board. Library funding comes from both governments, and the borough's portion is based on the percentage of borough residents who live outside the cities of Ketchikan and Saxman. Our first controversy. In the years leading up to the building of the current library, there were bitter debates over the location and the size of the new building, especially over the location. A number of sites were considered, some of which were close to the library's previous location in the Centennial Building. Many city residents, used to being able to walk to the library at its downtown location, were angry when the decision was made instead to use the Copper Ridge Lane location, up a steep hill accessible only by very hardy walkers or by car or bus. It's astonishing how long this bitterness has lingered. When I became library director in 2017, we'd been in our current building for 4 years. In talking with people away from the library, I was surprised that many people had not visited the new building and had no intention of doing so. That Taj Mahal on the hill is how some people described it. Still, in 2023, we get the occasional local resident who comes in and says, "I haven't been here before. This is nice. It's too bad it wasn't built downtown." From my arrival in 2017 through early 2020, the library was fairly controversy-free. Then came the pandemic, when the library, with everybody else in the world, scrambled to safely provide services when our building was shut, then open, then shut again, and pandemic measures such as mask wearing and social distancing were in place. We provided curbside service, take-home craft and maker bags, and virtual programming via Facebook, YouTube, and KRBD, Ketchikan's local community radio station. Our circulation dipped precipitously through the pandemic, but our patrons seemed happy with whatever books, programs, and other services we could provide, although we did get some pushback about masking. In the fall of 2021, when COVID-19 vaccines were available for adults, and the library building was once again consistently open to the public, we were slowly returning to normal and creating displays to celebrate and commemorate important events and milestones in our community. One of these was the publication of a new quarterly periodical called Loud and Queer, published by the Ketchikan Queer Collective. It features essays, fiction, and artwork by LGBTQIA+ residents of southern Southeast Alaska. The library cataloged the new periodical in the summer of 2021 and displayed it in the main adult area of the library as a new local publication, to add to our collection of local publications such as Seasonal, which is another quarterly journal, and Our Town. At the same time, coincidentally, the Children's Library displayed books to commemorate Banned Book Week that included the picture book Jacob's New Dress by Sarah and Ian Hoffman. In October 2021, I was away at the Durlead meeting of Alaska Public Library Directors when I received an email from a city colleague informing me that they had seen a Facebook post objecting to our Loud and Queer display and also to the display of picture books in the Children's Library. Before the Facebook post had been taken down a few days later, there were several comments expressing outrage at the displays. In the immediate aftermath of the post, library staff reported that they had received many expressions of support from patrons who either came into the library or called us, thanking us for the display and for our commitment to serving the entire community. The next week, after I'd returned from my meeting, a prominent member of the community came to visit me. He was a past member of the library's advisory board and had been a longtime member of the Ketchikan Gateway Borough Assembly. He said he represented a group of parents who were very upset about the LGBTQIA+ display. He wanted to negotiate a compromise to the effect that the library would not display books with themes of LGBTQIA or gender roles in the children's library. I declined to agree to this, explaining that the library is obligated to treat all groups in the community equally, and we could not have different rules for one group because another group disapproved of them. The man regretted that the library would not compromise on this matter. He put a sheet of paper on my desk, the draft of a proposition to partially defund the library, specifically to revoke the borough's non-area-wide powers to tax borough residents for library services. Borough funding accounts for about 40% of the library's budget. This corresponds to the percentage of Ketchikan Gateway Borough residents who live outside the cities of Ketchikan and Saxman. I responded that I'd be happy to speak to the group he represented and to work with them to develop services and programs that they could support, but that I could not agree to treat the LGBTQIA+ community differently than other groups. As indeed I could not, both as a librarian and as a city employee who is governed by our municipal equal rights ordinance. The man said that he would pass on my offer to meet with the group, and the meeting ended. The meeting was mostly cordial, although it did feel a little bit like an attempt at arm twisting. Several months later, the man admitted in a public forum that it was an attempt at arm twisting to force us to compromise. After this meeting, I heard nothing from the group of parents or from anyone else. There were no more reports of Facebook or other social media messages critical of the library. Things remained quiet for the next 7 months. In the meantime, the library made plans to resume in-person programming in March 2022, beginning with weekly story times. Masks were required for children 2 years of age and over during programs, since there was not yet a COVID-19 vaccine available for children. The mask requirement was not popular, but families attended anyway, and in-person programs were instantly well attended. We continued and still continue to offer virtual programs for young children, available on the library's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Amy Tupfer, our head of Children's Services, began planning for a robust schedule of summer programs. This was her first summer of in-person programs since she joined the staff in November of 2019, and she and her staff were thrilled to finally be able to return to a more normal summer. Back in the fall of 2021, a parent had asked Amy to hold a Drag Queen Storytime. At the time, the library had not yet resumed in-person programs, but when planning programs for Pride Month in 2022, Amy proposed including a Drag Queen Storytime. Now, I let division heads plan their own programming schedules, but I am always happy to review programs when asked. Amy asked me to review the June 2022 calendar. I did so and wholeheartedly approved the programs that were listed. Amy got in touch with a local resident, born and raised in Ketchikan and a respected teacher at the high school, who also performed locally as a drag queen. Their stage name is Luna, and they agreed to help lead a Drag Queen Storytime at the library. Luna and Amy scheduled the Storytime for June 17, 2022, and selected books and songs for the program. This was part of 3 activities the library planned to celebrate Pride Month. The other 2 activities were a rainbow reading challenge for all ages, with displays of books with LGBTQIA or gender identity and inclusiveness themes for adults, children, and teens, from which patrons could choose, read, and review a book for a chance at a prize drawing at the end of the month. The other activity was a Rainbow Family Maker Bag, with materials and instructions to make a variety of rainbow crafts, and an information sheet explaining different forms of gender identity. These 3 activities were similar to those the library regularly conducts to celebrate Indigenous Heritage Month, Filipino American History Month, African American History Month, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and Women's History Month. These Pride Month activities were completely separate from our children and teen summer program activities. The theme, if you'll recall, was Oceans of Possibilities, and we had many programs, events, and activities with an ocean theme. The library released its June 2022 event calendar in late May. The reaction was immediate. We received emails, letters, phone calls, and visits from people objecting to our Pride Month events, and particularly to Drag Queen Storytime. Many of the objections were to the idea of legitimizing different forms of gender expression. The concern was that at best this would be confusing for small children, and at worst it would sexualize children and lead to grooming for sexual abuse. I remember one phone call especially, a man who, after unsuccessfully attempting to explain to me that a woman was a biological and not a psychological concept, yelled at me that I was wrong and illogical, and the damage children would suffer would be my fault. It was wearing, to be sure, but I didn't get the worst of it. Amy was yelled at from a passing car and accosted by somebody in the supermarket who called her evil and a groomer of children. It was dreadful for her. After a few days, I sent talking points to the staff so that they could respond if people came in to complain and I wasn't available. But the majority of the condemnation of the Drag Queen Storytime was not in person, but online or via the phone. There were long Facebook threads condemning and then defending the library's decision to hold Pride Month events, and people began showing up at the Borough Assembly and City Council meetings to either object to or defend the library's actions. Finally, the controversy reached the point where the chair of the Library Advisory Board scheduled a special public hearing on the matter. The hearing took place on June 9th, a week before the Storytime. Public comment, pro and con, lasted an hour and a half, and in the end, the board voted to recommend that Pride Month events go forward. But because of the very public nature of the controversy, the Ketchikan City Council decided that they would vote on whether or not the library could proceed with the Drag Queen Storytime at their June 16th meeting, the evening before the Storytime was to take place. After much public comment, debate in council, and the legal opinion of the city attorney, the council voted in favor of the Storytime going forward. Throughout all of this, Luna and Amy were amazingly brave and steadfast. I spoke to Luna on the phone a week or so before the story time, when the controversy was at its height. I asked if they had reservations about going forward with the program, and Luna unhesitatingly said no. They were committed and looking forward to it. To prepare library staff for whatever would happen that day, we reviewed the active shooter training we had undergone a few years before and asked the Ketchikan Police Department to have an officer or two on site. Amy and the children's library staff developed a plan for handling what we expected to be overflow crowds. Each library staff person was assigned a task and a location, and we scheduled substitute staff to help. The day came, June 17th, and it was a beautiful sunny day. Storytime was at 10:30 a.m., and families crowded at the entrance before we opened at 10. There were some protesters. A group of half a dozen people, led by a clergyman, held a prayer vigil near the side entrance, and a few others held signs or spoke with people before they entered the building. Some even complained at the circulation desk. They did not attempt to stop anybody else from coming in, however, and for the most part, conversations remained civil. Many others came to support Luna in the library, even though they were not intending to attend the story time. I was perplexed by several people with large umbrellas who stood near the front entrance. They explained that the umbrellas were to shield attendees if necessary, should they be yelled at or accosted by protesters. Fortunately, it was not needed, and the colorful umbrellas actually contributed to the celebratory atmosphere. 4 police officers, including the chief, stood by the library's entrance. We were grateful to have them there, since their presence ensured a certain level of civility. But mostly the officers were just able to chat with people on their way in. A reporter from KRBD Radio was there interviewing people, and a reporter and photographer from the Ketchikan Daily News covered the event as well. Visually, a rainbow theme predominated. Parents and children wore sparkly outfits and colorful t-shirts, tutus, and hats, and library staff went all out with their outlandish costumes, and most members of our staff, with the exception of myself, can rock a crazy costume. Luna was magnificent as a sparkly princess. Small children looked at her in wonder, and many families asked to take pictures with Luna after the program. We filled up the large meeting room and held the first program. Amy began by leading everyone in a song, and then read a few of these picture books. Luna followed by reading another one of these books, and the program ended with another song. By then, more families had arrived, and we knew we'd need to do at least one more program. The children, staff, were ready with plastic wristbands for the second program, and eventually the third program, and sent families back to wait their turn in the children's library. In the end, Luna graciously did 3 back-to-back programs, with a total attendance of 105 children and their parents and grandparents. A member of City Council attended as well. He was opposed to the story time but was charmed by the program, although he continues to oppose Drag Queen Storytimes for young children. Overall, the day was a triumph, and library staff were relieved and thrilled that it had gone so well. Now, just a few weeks ago, I had an older woman, a lifelong Ketchikan resident and library patron, say that the Drag Queen Storytime made her proud to be from Ketchikan. The aftermath. In late June, the library received a request from a borough official to sponsor a Bible Storytime featuring the official. I brought the request to the city attorney, who, after researching precedent surrounding the Establishment Clause of the Constitution, provided the following guidance. The library, as a department of the city government, could not sponsor a program with a particular religious point of view. The library could provide a meeting space for such a program, just as it does for any nonprofit group, and the program could be advertised on our events calendar, as long as it included a statement that the program was not sponsored by the city or the library. The borough official responded that they would talk with their church group about this, and that was the last we heard of it. We've had a few requests since then to conduct a Bible story time, and have responded with our meeting room policy and request form, and have had no formal request to reserve a meeting space for that purpose. The same man that had met with me back in the fall of 2021 requested at the June 20th Borough Assembly meeting that the Assembly place on the October 2022 ballot a proposition to revoke the borough's non-area-wide power to tax borough residents for library services. This power has been in effect since 1985, when borough voters approved the tax and made it possible for residents outside the city to sign up for a library account without paying a charge for doing so. The Borough Assembly declined to place the proposition on the ballot for lack of a second. As I mentioned earlier, the amount the borough contributes to the library's budget is based on the percentage of the Ketchikan Gateway Borough's population that lives outside the cities of Ketchikan and Saxman, an average of about 40%. Since 2016, the library has also provided to the city and borough quarterly statistics on the percentage of library users in and outside the city, and these have been remarkably consistent. 40% on average of people with library accounts live outside of the cities, and these account for an average of about 40% of the library's circulation. After the Assembly meeting, the man and others began a petition to put the proposition on the October 2022 ballot for voters outside the cities of Ketchikan and Saxman. In late August, they succeeded in getting enough signatures to do so, and it went on the ballot as Proposition 2. If the proposition succeeded, the library's budget would be cut by 40%, a devastating loss. The Friends of the Library and many others in the community came together to campaign to defeat the measure. A proposal to City Council to help fund the campaign was defeated because the Council preferred not to take sides in a ballot measure and allow voters to make that decision. For the same reason, some very passionate members of the city-owned telecommunications company were not able to work on a social media and print ad campaign to defeat Prop 2. Instead, an independent group of supporters came together, calling themselves Stand with the Ketchikan Library, and raised almost $10,000 for the campaign to defeat Proposition 2. Signs and postcards were created with the help of local artists, a social media campaign was launched, and rallies were organized. From late August through the beginning of October, the group tirelessly worked to defeat the proposition and to show the consequences if it were approved by voters. On September 22nd, KRBD Radio broadcast a debate between Kathy Bowling, library manager of the UAS Ketchikan Campus Library, who was opposed to Prop 2, and the man who had visited me back in October of 2021 and who had helped initiate Prop 2. This was part of KRBD's series of on-air debates leading up to the election. At the library, meanwhile, we had several inquiries from borough residents asking how much their library accounts would cost should the measure be approved by voters. Since the measure would not go into effect until 2024, we replied that the details of these operational cuts would be worked out in 2023 if the proposition passed. The group supporting Proposition 2 may have heard some of these same concerns because they began assuring borough residents publicly that even if the proposition passed, the borough would find other ways to provide funding for the library. CPV money was proposed or some other way of funding. Since CPV, or Commercial Passenger Vessel Tax money, is strictly for tourism-related services, and the library's location on top of a steep hill outside downtown limits the number of tourists we serve, it was unclear if the borough would be able to use this money for library services. In September, Stand with Ketchikan Library organized 2 rallies, a week apart, to encourage people to vote against Proposition 2. At the first rally, on a beautiful sunny day, they stood outside in a small car park next to the North Tongass Highway, waving signs. The Friends of the Library, who have always been terrific advocates, held a book giveaway from their large collection of donated books. They hold regular book sales with the proceeds going to library activities and projects. A borough official who opposed the Drag Queen Storytime set up an informational tailgate in the same car park during the rally. There were plenty of people honking to show their support for the library, and others yelling that they were going to vote for the proposition. The second rally, a week later, was on a cold, rainy day south of town, but there were just as many people out to wave signs and provide information on the effects of Proposition 2 on library staffing and services. It was heartening to see this amazing support. As the October 4th municipal elections approached, we were cautiously optimistic that Proposition 2 would be defeated by voters north and south of the city. It was, but by a narrow margin. 818 voted for the proposition and 1,066 voted against it. We celebrated anyway. It was great not to have to plan for a much reduced library. The thing about an issue such as this, an issue that exposes great differences in the community, is that it's not over with a single victory. Even before the municipal election, several influential people floated a proposal to transfer the library to the borough from the city. We're currently a city department. One reason given for proposing this is that some in the borough feel that they are being taxed twice for the library. Once when they pay sales tax in stores located in the city, and once with the borough library tax. Now, the city's portion of the library's budget actually comes from taxes on city property, and the borough's portion comes from the tax on borough property. But the feeling remains that borough residents pay more than their fair share for library services, and furthermore that they do not have a say in electing the body that governs the library, which is currently the Ketchikan City Council, and this is quite true. From their point of view, therefore, it is taxation without representation. Now, this is related to the perception that borough residents do not have as much of a say as city residents in determining library policies, services, and programs, and that if the library were a borough department, it would be forced to be more accommodating to borough residents' demands. Now, the fact is that library staff listen and consider suggestions and criticism from everybody who contacts us, and we don't ask whether that person is from the city or elsewhere in the borough. The Library Advisory Board, established by city ordinance, includes a representative of the Borough Assembly and also a resident of the borough outside the city, as well as a city council representative, a Friends of the Library rep, a teen representative, often a member of the library's teen advisory group, and a couple of at-large members. All of which, with the exception of the city council representative, can come from anywhere in the borough. Everyone has an equal say regardless of where they reside. But there continues to be a feeling among some borough residents that their voices are not heard, and that if the library were a borough department, they would be. One of the most recent challenges began just a few months ago. For the first time in at least 10 years, we have had a formal request, several in fact, to remove a book from our collection. The book is Let's Talk About It by Erica Moen and Matthew Nolan. We had 10 initial challenges to the book, several of which were submitted within minutes of each other. Only one person indicated that they had read the book. Others had seen an online video that is going around that highlighted the most controversial pages. Our reconsideration process is that these requests first go to the selector who selected the book, who considers the points raised in the request and writes a response with an explanation of how the book was selected. If not satisfied with the response, the person can appeal the decision to the library director, who will respond in writing within 10 days. If unsatisfied with the director's response, the person can then request that the Library Advisory Board conduct a public hearing on the matter, and then recommend a disposition of the request. One person has gone through this process and has requested that the Library Advisory Board conduct a public hearing on whether or not to retain the book in the teen nonfiction section. This hearing will take place at the board's upcoming April meeting. And Pride Month is coming up again in June. From the time we held Drag Queen Storytime last June, we've had people requesting that we hold another one. One person said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I'm so sorry, we were out of town and we couldn't attend the story time. When will the next one be?" Others have said that after last year's controversy, we would be ill-advised, well, stupid was the word they used, to do another Drag Queen Storytime. Why would the library want to further divide an already divided community? We're not sure what Pride Month programming will be doing this June. We will be doing something, but we are sure that the library's mission is to serve the entire community and every group within it. A few of the most challenging aspects of all these challenges have been: 1. Although many people have voiced their concerns publicly, others have chosen to speak anonymously through representatives. In part because of this anonymity, it's difficult to pinpoint and address rumors. For example, I was speaking with someone just recently who said that they had heard that some children were brought to the Drag Queen Storytime without their parents' knowledge or consent. Again, these people have insisted on being anonymous, so it's impossible to investigate these rumors and respond to them. 2. Some people are afraid that unaccompanied children or adolescents will see enticing displays of LGBTQIA+ materials, or wander into a program or check out a book that has content that will damage them or that their parents will disapprove of. The library does not allow very young children into the library unaccompanied, but we do allow older children and teens to be in the library by themselves. We emphasize that parents need to accompany their children to the library if they have concerns about their children seeing content that they don't approve of. But some people instead would like the library to make controversial material and programs inaccessible. 3. As city employees, we could provide information when requested, but our hands were very much tied as far as speaking our minds one way or the other on these controversies. We were very grateful to all our supporters in the community, but very frustrated at how little we could contribute to conversations on these matters. 4. Related to this, it's often been frustrating, all the way around, I think, to have conversations with people that end inconclusively and with all sides walking away unsatisfied. In my many conversations with those who wished us to cancel Drag Queen Storytime or remove the book Let's Talk About It from the collection, I don't know that there was a single conversation that ended with any of us dramatically changing our minds. I was a philosophy major, and all of this reminded me of Plato's Dialogues, in which Socrates argued with various leaders of Athens about the nature of piety or some other concept. These dialogues never ended with either side changing their mind. Instead, the man arguing with Socrates would end by saying, in effect, I'm a very busy man. I don't have time to argue with you about this nonsense, and then storming off. My only hope is that we can reach some kind of balance and mutual respect by having the conversations. 5. With all the unrest and upset over the past several months, we are having to guard against the tendency to self-censor, to decide not to acquire that book or conduct that program for fear that will cause further upset in the community. We need to constantly remind ourselves that our mission is to serve the entire community by providing a wide range of perspective and points of view, particularly on controversial topics. Lessons learned. Throughout this process, the library made mistakes. Here are a few of them. 1. Our library has a very active social media presence, especially on Facebook and Instagram. We post several times a day on upcoming programs, services, and activities, and react with a thumbs up to positive comments about the library on other feeds. Last May and June, there were many Facebook posts and comments on the upcoming Drag Queen Storytime, both condemning and defending it. Library staff initially began reacting with a thumbs up to comments defending the library's actions, not as themselves using their personal Facebook accounts, but as the library. One critic of the library's programs was very upset that the library was approving comments that they felt were critical of them. We quickly undid the reactions, but the critic threatened the library with legal action, although this did not come to fruition. In response to this, we discontinued a generic Facebook account for library staff, we reviewed as a staff the city's social media policy, and we required that staff only post to the library's Facebook page while they were at work. As some of you know, it is devilishly easy to shift from a personal to a work Facebook page and not even realize it. This taught us that lesson. 2. When the Drag Queen Storytime controversy began, all of us as a staff were dismayed at hearing so much criticism, and we tended to vent amongst ourselves, in the workroom and in the break room. Not in public, but certainly among ourselves. What we didn't initially realize is that not everybody on our staff was in favor of the Drag Queen Storytime, and the venting in the back room made some staff feel unable to voice their concerns. When we learned of this, we talked in a staff meeting about respecting our internal differences about this issue. 3. Many of our policies and procedures are not as complete as they should be, and we have been a little too casual about them. We didn't realize this until we needed to use them to respond to these challenges. So that is something we're going to need to work on in the future. And 4, we are far better at advertising what we do, the programs, services, and collections we provide, than we are at advertising and explaining to people why we do it. We have the library's mission on our website, but we rarely talk about it. So I'm going to conclude by talking about why we do what we do. In the past year or so, some have said that the library should be a safe place, a haven, and they believe it is no longer a safe place. I believe that the library is a safe place. It's a safe place to explore the world, to explore new ideas, new discoveries, new points of view, and new modes of personal and artistic expression. It's a safe place to do these things, even if these are controversial or unpopular, and actually, especially if they are so. The library is not, however, a place to be safe from the world. The library is not and should not be sanitized to protect people from unwelcome opinions, modes of personal expression, or different points of view. After all, the objectionable idea of today is often the received wisdom of tomorrow. The group that is vilified today may be the respected and valued citizens of tomorrow. Now, I've been asked if this inclusivity embraces criminals and pedophiles. Now, by providing materials and programming for the people at our local correctional center, the library does serve those who have broken the law. But we do not serve them by assisting them in their law breaking. Instead, we hope to provide them with stories of others who have struggled as they have struggled and have ultimately chosen a different, more positive path. By providing a wide range of materials for our diverse community, we seek not to feed people's intolerance, fear, and ignorance, but to nurture their empathy, curiosity, and desire to understand and connect with others. In the introduction to the library's collection development policy, there is the sentence, "The Ketchikan Public Library subscribes to and supports the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights and the American Library Association Freedom to Read Statement." We have recently been criticized for our adherence to these statements. It had been years since I'd looked at either one. In the day-to-day rush to get tasks done, I hadn't thought for a long time about why libraries do what we do. So I read both statements, as well as an interesting letter written by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in response to the original Freedom to Read statement issued by the ALA in 1953. Eisenhower wrote to the president of the American Library Association in a letter dated June 24, 1953, at the height of McCarthyism and the House Un-American Activities Committee. I'll read just the last 2 paragraphs of President Eisenhower's letter. "But we know that freedom cannot be served by the devices of the tyrant, as it is an ancient truth that freedom cannot be legislated into existence, so it is no less obvious that freedom cannot be censored into existence. And any who act as if freedom's defenses are to be found in suppression and suspicion and fear confess a doctrine that is alien to America. The libraries of America are and must ever remain the home of free, inquiring minds. To them, our citizens of all ages and races, of all creeds and political persuasions, must ever be able to turn with clear confidence that there they can freely seek the whole truth, unwarped by fashion and uncompromised by expediency. For in such whole and healthy knowledge alone are to be found and understood those majestic truths of man's nature and destiny that prove to each succeeding generation the validity of freedom. Sincerely, Dwight D. Eisenhower. I find this letter inspiring and thoughtful, coming from a time 70 years ago that shares many characteristics with our own time. So that is the story of the Ketchikan Public Library and the Drag Queen Storytime, at least as it stands so far. It is definitely a marathon and not a sprint. Thank you so much for your attention.